Have you ever noticed that life seems to change more between 65 and 75 than it did in the 20 years before? Last year you carried the groceries without thinking. Today you set them down halfway to the kitchen. Last year you called a friend just because you felt like talking. Today you think about it and somehow never make the call. Most people assume these are simply signs of getting older. They tell themselves, well, this is just what happens now. But what if that's not the whole story? What if the decade between 65 and 75 is different from every stage that came before it? Not because your life is ending, but because it is changing in ways no one prepared you for. I believe this is the most difficult decade of life, not because of illness, not because of money, not even because of age itself. It's difficult because several quiet changes begin happening at the same time. Your body asks more from you. Your social world becomes smaller. The roles that once defined you begin to fade. And perhaps most surprisingly, your brain starts working differently than it did for the previous 60 years. The hardest part is that these changes rarely arrive with a warning. They happen slowly, almost invisibly, until one day you realize that ordinary life feels heavier than it used to. In this video, we'll explore the biggest changes that happen between 65 and 75, why they matter, and what you can do today to navigate this decade with more strength, purpose, and peace. And if you're somewhere in this stage of life right now, stay with me. What you're about to hear may help you understand yourself in a completely new way. The first change surprises almost everyone. Most people think the body gets weaker first. But that's not usually what happens. A man named Robert, 72 years old, stood in his kitchen one Tuesday morning, holding a grocery bag. There was nothing unusual about the bag. He had carried thousands like it throughout his life, yet this one felt heavier than it should. Halfway to the refrigerator, he set it down and told himself he would come back in a minute. 3 hours later, it was still there. Many people between 65 and 75 experience moments like this. They assume their muscles are disappearing. They assume aging has finally caught up with them. But the truth is often more complicated. One of the biggest misunderstandings about aging is believing that physical decline begins in the body. In many cases, it begins in the brain. Before a muscle weakens, the desire to use it often grows quieter. You stop taking the longer walk. You stop carrying the heavier bag. You stop choosing the stairs. Not because you can't, but because it feels easier not to. At first, these choices seem harmless, but over time, they create a cycle. Less movement leads to less strength. Less strength leads to less confidence. Less confidence leads to even less movement. Soon, ordinary tasks begin feeling harder than they should. The good news is that staying strong after 65 doesn't require a gym membership or intense workouts. What matters most is continuing to use the abilities you still have. A short walk around the block, standing up from a chair a few extra times, stretching while watching television, carrying your own groceries when it's safe to do so. Small actions send a powerful message to the brain. I'm still using this body. The people who age well are rarely the strongest people. They're simply the people who never stop moving completely. They understand that aging is not one dramatic event. It's a series of small decisions repeated every day. And perhaps the most important decision is refusing to give up abilities before you truly have to. Because here's the truth. Your body doesn't usually become weak overnight. Long before weakness appears, motivation becomes quieter. Learning to notice that change and gently respond with action instead of avoidance may be one of the most important skills you'll need during this decade of life. The second change is much quieter. It has nothing to do with your muscles or your health. It's the way your world slowly becomes smaller without you noticing. There is a change that happens between 65 and 75 that many people never notice until it has already taken hold. It doesn't arrive with pain. It doesn't show up on a medical test, and yet it quietly changes everyday life. The world begins to get smaller, not physically. The streets are still there. The coffee shop is still there. Your friends are still only a phone call away. But somehow, you go out less. You call less. You visit less. You participate less. At first, it's easy to explain. You're tired. The weather isn't great. You'll do it next week. But weeks become months, and months become years. One day, you realize that your life mostly happens within the same few rooms, the same routines, and the same conversations. This doesn't happen because people suddenly stop liking other people. In fact, most older adults still enjoy company when they're around it. The real issue is that the brain begins conserving energy. Activities that once felt effortless now require a little more mental effort. Making a phone call, driving across town, attending a social gathering, meeting someone new. None of these tasks are difficult, but they no longer feel automatic. As a result, many people wait until they feel like it. The problem is that the feeling often never arrives, and so a dangerous cycle begins. You don't call because you haven't spoken recently. Others don't call because they assume you're busy. The connection weakens. Then reaching out feels even harder. What started as a small pause slowly becomes isolation. The people who navigate this decade successfully understand something important. They don't wait for motivation. They create regular points of connection, not necessarily close friendships, just familiar faces. The neighbor who waves every morning, the cashier who recognizes your name, the walking group that meets every Thursday, the friend you call once a week, even when there's nothing important to discuss. These small connections may seem insignificant, but they remind us that we are still part of the world around us. And there is another lesson many people learned during this decade. There is a difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is the pain of unwanted isolation. Solitude is the peace of chosen quiet. Learning that difference can change everything, because the goal isn't to be surrounded by people all the time. The goal is to stay connected while also becoming comfortable with your own company. The world doesn't have to become smaller as you grow older, but it does require intention. A phone call, a short visit, a familiar face. Sometimes the difference between a shrinking life and a meaningful one is simply staying connected, one small conversation at a time. Of all the changes people experience during this decade, this may be the most painful. It's the feeling that you're no longer needed the way you once were. For many people, the most difficult part of life between 65 and 75 isn't physical at all. It's emotional, and it often arrives without warning. For decades, your life may have revolved around responsibilities. You went to work, you paid the bills, you raised children, you solved problems, you took care of people. Every day, someone needed something from you. Then, little by little, that begins to change. Retirement arrives. The children build lives of their own. The phone rings less often. Family decisions no longer depend on your opinion the way they once did. From the outside, this can look like freedom. But for many people, it feels surprisingly empty. A woman named Margaret experienced this shortly after her 70th birthday. Nothing was wrong with her life. Her health was relatively good. Her children loved her. Her finances were stable. Yet she often woke up wondering why she felt restless and dissatisfied. Eventually, she realized what was missing. For the first time in more than 50 years, Nobody truly needed her. That realization hit harder than she expected. The truth is that human beings don't simply need comfort and security. We need purpose. We need meaning. We need to feel that our presence matters. When those things disappear, life can begin to feel smaller, even if nothing is technically wrong. This is why some people seem to age rapidly after retirement, while others appear energized and engaged well into their 80s. The difference is often purpose. The people who thrive during this decade find new reasons to get up in the morning. Some volunteer at local organizations. Some help care for grandchildren. Some mentor younger people. Some join community groups, churches, or clubs. Others discover entirely new interests they never had time to pursue before. The activity itself is not what matters most. What matters is having something that pulls you forward, something that reminds you that your experience, wisdom, and presence still have value. Because they do. One of the greatest myths about aging is that your most meaningful contributions are behind you. In reality, many people discover their deepest sense of purpose after 70, not because they are doing more, but because they finally have the freedom to choose what truly matters. The goal of this decade is not to stay busy, it's to stay meaningful, because people rarely grow old simply because of the passing years. More often, they grow old when they stop feeling connected to a purpose larger than themselves. There's another change happening beneath the surface. Without realizing it, many of us start choosing familiarity over growth. One of the least discussed changes between 65 and 75 has nothing to do with wrinkles, gray hair, or aching joints. It happens inside the brain. Without realizing it, many people begin choosing safety over growth. The same route to the grocery store, the same table at the same restaurant, the same television programs, the same conversations, the same daily routine. At first, this feels comfortable. After all, you've spent decades building a life that works. Why change it? But there is a hidden danger in too much familiarity. The brain thrives on novelty. It was designed to learn, adapt, and explore. When we encounter something new, the brain becomes more alert. It pays attention. It creates new connections. It stays engaged with the world. When every day becomes a repeat of the day before, that process begins to slow. The brain isn't failing. It's simply receiving fewer reasons to stay active. This is why two people of the same age can seem completely different. One person at 75 appears curious, energetic, and mentally sharp. Another at 65 already feels stuck, bored, and disconnected. The difference is often not genetics. It's their relationship with new experiences. The people who continue growing after 70 rarely do anything dramatic. They don't necessarily climb mountains or travel the world. Instead, they remain open to small surprises. A new book by an unfamiliar author, a different walking route, a community class, a hobby they've never tried before, a conversation with someone outside their usual circle. These small experiences tell the brain something important. There is still more to discover, and that message matters. Because growth does not end when a career ends. Learning does not end when children leave home. Curiosity does not have an expiration date. In fact, many people discover entirely new parts of themselves during this decade. They learn to paint. They learn to garden. They join a walking group. They start writing, volunteering, or studying subjects they never had time to explore before. The goal isn't to reinvent your life overnight. The goal is simply to avoid becoming trapped inside the same day repeated hundreds of times. So here's a simple challenge. Once each week, do one thing you've never done before. Nothing big, nothing expensive, just something unfamiliar. A new place, a new experience, a new conversation. Because the moment we stop growing, life begins to feel smaller. But when we remain curious, even in small ways, the world continues to expand. And perhaps that's one of the most powerful choices we can make during this decade of life. And then comes a lesson that many strong, independent people struggle with for years. There is a belief that many people carry into their 70s without even realizing it. It sounds something like this. I've taken care of myself my entire life. I don't want to be a burden. I can handle it. For decades, these beliefs served them well. They worked hard. They solved problems. They raised families. They pushed through difficulties without asking much from anyone. Strength became part of their identity. Independence became a source of pride. But somewhere between 65 and 75, life begins asking a different question. Not, can you do everything yourself? But, can you recognize when you shouldn't have to? Many people struggle with this transition. A woman might fall in her home and tell no one. A man might ignore health concerns because he doesn't want his children to worry. A couple may quietly struggle with daily tasks long after they should have asked for support. Not because they are stubborn, because they are afraid. Afraid of losing independence. Afraid of appearing weak. Afraid of becoming someone who needs help. Yet one of the greatest ironies of aging is that refusing help often leads to losing independence faster. Think about it this way. When a person waits too long to address a problem, the problem usually grows. A small mobility issue becomes a serious fall. A manageable health concern becomes an emergency. A feeling of loneliness becomes years of isolation. The strongest people are not the ones who carry every burden alone. The strongest people are the ones who know when to share the weight. That is not weakness. That is wisdom. In fact, asking for help requires a level of honesty that many people never develop. It means admitting that life has changed. It means accepting reality instead of fighting it. And acceptance is not surrender. Acceptance is strategy. The people who thrive during this decade understand that support comes in many forms. Sometimes it's a conversation with a doctor. Sometimes it's asking a neighbor for assistance. Sometimes it's allowing a family member to help with a task that has become difficult. Sometimes it's simply telling the truth when someone asks, "How are you doing?" Not the automatic answer. Not, "I'm fine." The real answer. Because the moment we stop pretending everything is okay, we create space for genuine connection. And often, the people who love us are relieved when we do. They don't expect perfection. They don't expect us to carry every burden alone. They simply want the opportunity to be part of our lives. Perhaps that's the lesson many people spend years learning. Independence is valuable, but connection is essential. The goal is not to prove that you can do everything by yourself. The goal is to live well. And sometimes living well means allowing others to walk beside you. Not because you are incapable, not because you have failed, but because no stage of life was ever meant to be carried alone. The truth is that asking for help is not the end of independence. Very often, it is exactly what protects it. But hidden inside all these changes is an opportunity that many people overlook. For much of your life, your time belonged to other people. Your family needed you. Your children depended on you. Your employer expected things from you. There were bills to pay, responsibilities to carry, and problems to solve. For decades, putting yourself last may have felt normal. In some ways, it may even have felt necessary. But between 65 and 75, something remarkable becomes possible. For the first time in many years, you have the opportunity to ask a question that often gets ignored. What brings me joy? Not what impresses other people, not what makes you productive, not what someone else expects. What brings joy to you? For some people, it's sitting quietly with a book on a rainy afternoon. For others, it's gardening, painting, fishing, traveling, or simply taking a long walk without feeling rushed. The activity itself doesn't matter. What matters is reconnecting with the parts of yourself that existed before responsibilities took over. Many older adults spend so much time caring for others that they forget they are allowed to care for themselves too. But joy is not selfish. In fact, joy is fuel. It gives us energy, resilience, and a reason to keep looking forward. And perhaps that's one of the greatest opportunities hidden inside this decade. Not to become younger, not to become busier, but to become more yourself. Because after a lifetime of meeting other people's expectations, these years offer something rare: the freedom to discover what truly makes your life feel meaningful. And that may be one of the greatest gifts of all. If there's one thing I hope you remember from this video, it's this: the years between 65 and 75 are not difficult because life is ending. They are difficult because life is changing. Your body begins asking for more attention. Your social world requires more intention. Your sense of purpose may need to be rediscovered. Your brain asks for novelty instead of routine. And, perhaps most importantly, you learn that accepting support is not weakness, it is wisdom. These changes can feel unsettling at first. They can make you wonder whether you're becoming a smaller version of the person you once were. But what if that's not what's happening at all? What if this decade isn't about becoming less? What if it's about becoming more intentional? More intentional about how you spend your energy. More intentional about who you spend your time with. More intentional about what truly matters. The truth is that every stage of life asks something different from us. When you were young, life asked you to build. When you reached middle age, life asked you to provide. Now, life is asking you to choose. To choose what deserves your attention. To choose what brings you meaning. To choose what brings you joy. And that choice is a gift many people never fully recognize. So as you move through this decade, remember three simple things. Keep moving, even when it's easier not to. Keep connecting, even when the world feels smaller. Keep growing, even when routine feels comfortable. Because the people who arrive at 80 with the greatest peace are rarely the strongest, the richest, or the busiest. They are the ones who stayed curious, stayed connected, and stayed engaged with life. This may be the most difficult decade of life, but it can also become the most honest, the most meaningful, and the most rewarding. And perhaps, for the first time in many years, it can be the decade that truly belongs to you. If this message resonated with you, leave a comment below and tell us your age and where you're watching from. And if you'd like more insights on aging well, healthy living, and finding purpose after 60, don't forget to subscribe and join us for the next video. Take good care of yourself. You deserve it.